In this lesson, we are going to speak about perspective in Middle Age, in particular, starting from Byzantine times, the 6th century, to the beginning of the Italian Renaissance. So we will see the development of perspective and also some very interesting kind of perspective, I will tell you. So we start from this wonderful mosaic. You can see here it is representing Empress Theodora and attendants, Byzantine mosaic in San Vitale in Ravenna. And it is like something completely different compared to the ancient Roman art, because in this case, perspective disappears completely. It is not something that is interesting for these artists and for this kind of civilization to represent depth, but just to represent something somehow sacred with this golden background and the importance of the empress in this case and all these attendants and people belonging to the court of the emperor and empress. So it is just something to define and to subline in a very strong way the importance of these characters here, very imposing to the people visiting this beautiful basilica in Ravenna. Just this little basin on the left is representing somehow a kind of perspective, but it is just the upturn to show that there is water inside in this little fountain. For the rest, we don't have any kind of reference to perspective. Approaching towards the invention of a vanishing point perspective, at a certain point, we discover some kind of very interesting perspective. It is called reverse perspective, and it is somehow exactly the opposite of vanishing point perspective. In this case, we can consider, for example, this painting that is showing Angel's Trinity by Andrei Rublev in 1422. The way to represent this furniture, these chairs and thrones, it's very, very special. It's very unlike, very strange. For example, you can see together two different sides, if we try to draw to discover the perspective here, two different sides of this base, and the vanishing point is going towards us, towards the viewers, instead of escaping far away to the infinite vanishing point. This is the reverse perspective that is absolutely amazing, absolutely special, and very used during the early Middle Age, but still living in general in the Russian paintings, for example, in the Orthodox paintings. You can find that also in other examples, if you consider this photographic experiment by David Hockney, he was able to recall this reverse perspective, creating this effect where the vanishing point is closer to us, so it's more present around us. And this is very interesting and very inspiring from many artists during, for example, Cubism or last century avant-gardes, because it's something that wants to avoid the academic vanishing point perspective, but he wants to find something that is somehow closer to the viewer, closer to the artist, closer to us in general. And so not something escaping, but something that also shows us different sides of many different items. Also, this kind of perspective, we can say that it has to do with time, because it is describing our way of looking at things. We are moving around things. So we can see more or less in a few seconds one side, for example, of a chair, like in this case, and the other side as well. So it's a completely different kind of vision, of philosophy of vision. I think it's very, very interesting because we are so used to see the vanishing point perspective vision. We think that is the only way to see the reality, but actually there are many ways, and you will find at the end of this course your personal way to see the world. Now I'm going to tell you about the first attempts to be closer to a kind of vanishing point perspective representation. And I will do it through the wonderful work of one of the biggest painters of all time, Giotto. Every single character begins to have a kind of volume. They have a depth, just like people. They are like people in a space, in a particular interior in this case. If you consider ceilings in general with all these beams is very easy, is a perfect element to use for vanishing point perspective. And you try to trace lines here and here. And here, I do in a very fast way here, but you can see a vanishing point in this position. So there is already the idea that you need a point where every line has to run, where all the lines together are converging. And but at the same time, Giotto was not already able to solve this problem in general, because if you go to consider these steps at the bottom part of this fresco, you can realize that these lines are not running to the same vanishing point, has a vanishing point perspective request, but they are parallel and they are kind of, I don't know, like a part of another painting put on this interior space, on this image. So there is something strange, but let's say that the way to represent the reality begins to be a little bit closer to our photographic way. Now we can go on with Giotto because he was a really revolutionary artist. And we can see that also in this case, in this beautiful fresco that is showing, that is speaking about the confirmation of the rule of San Francesco. And we can see St. Francis in front of the Pope in this space. Again, every single character is described by Giotto with a volume. It is not a flat figure. And you can see that there are all these architectural elements near the ceiling that are ruled by a certain kind of theory, and they are following particular lines, going to find a vanishing point. So we are also here closer to a kind of a vanishing point perspective theory. But again, in the bottom of the fresco, you can see these steps that have been described by parallel lines, has nothing to do with the perspective of the ceiling. So even in this case, Giotto was not able, or maybe not completely interested, to find converging line to the same vanishing point perspective of the ceiling. But still, there is a very big interest in representing the reality. Also in this fresco by Giotto, dedicated to the birth of the Virgin, we can see this interest in representing perspective. in particular through this architecture here, the house of the Virgin. And we can see that all these lines are somehow converging to a very far vanishing point that is outside of this image. Consider that in Western civilization, in Western paintings, in particular, considering the vanishing point perspective, every image, every paintings, every fresco is like an image you see through a window. You have a kind of a frame all around, and you always see the reality through this window. In this case, you can see all these different lines converging to one very far vanishing point that is outside this general window. So the research was going ahead, and Giotto was able to find some kind of vision that is closer to reality. Now we can consider another maestro who tried to make some study about perspective representation. We're speaking about the great Duccio di Buoninsegna, who made this beautiful painting regarding the announcement of the death of her son to Mary. And it is representing in a very funny way this interior space. And you still see the same problem Giotto had, because if you consider this step at the basis of the Holy Mary, you can see that this perspective with this parallel line go away and never meeting. And then we consider this line in the ceiling with a vanishing point perspective that is more or less at the same level of the face of the Virgin. You see that there is no connection between the two different kinds of perspective. It is not a case that the vanishing point is near the face of the Virgin, because perspective is going to be not just a way to represent a space, but also a way to represent the importance of the characters inside a painting and the importance of certain items or elements the painter is interested to sublime. It's very funny to make the comparison between these two different paintings. There are 200 years between one and the other, and you see the big evolution of vanishing point perspective studies, in particular between the painting we have already described by Duccio di Buoninsegna and these wonderful paintings about more or less the same subject, because also in this case we are speaking about the announcement. And you can see that the problem Giotto and Duccio had before, not finding a precise vanishing point perspective for every part of the composition, it is completely solved in the painting by Sandro Botticelli, where in the full Renaissance, when you can see all the lines, and they are sublimed by the floor lines here. In fact, you can see here in Sandro Botticelli announcement this incredible perspective where everything is converging to this vanishing point perspective. In the very center of this painting, you can find also the horizon that is here. The landscape in the background is very clear compared the characters and the interior space, because there's a kind of density of the air. So more the air is far away, more is dense, because it is made by many different layers of air. So what is very far away is behind a kind of a mist, where everything, all the colors are muted. So now we can be more aware about what happened during the Middle Age and this passage from Byzantine time to Middle Age and Renaissance, with a description of a very particular way, the vanishing point perspective, to describe the reality. In the next lesson, we will discover the incredible evolution of the vanishing point perspective.